We are trying to unpack the judgment of the Constitutional Court. Just moments ago, Justice Chris Jafta delivering his ruling in the case against the Public Protector and the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, with regards to the application on whether Ramaphosa misled Parliament over the funding of the CR17 campaign. Justice Jafta saying that the Public Protector was wrong, both in fact and in law, that indeed the President did not mislead Parliament.
The Public Protector was wrong to change the code. She could not have conceivably thought that willfully could mean inadvertently. These words are mutually exclusive. What she did went beyond the parameters of interpretation, but the finding itself is framed in terms that are concerning. The President could not inadvertently and deliberately mislead Parliament, because these two words cannot apply at the same time. It is either one or the other. Therefore, the Public Protector was wrong on the facts and on the law with regard to the issue whether the President had willfully misled Parliament, and the High Court was right to set aside her finding.
Well, that's Justice Chris Jafta on the question about whether or not the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, misled Parliament when he responded to that question that was put to him by the former leader of the main opposition, who now leads his own movement, One South Africa movement, Mmusi Maimane. He joins us now. Mr. Maimane, we are not going to put you on the spot about your question, which was factually incorrect. That's what the Constitutional Court has said, which ties in with what the High Court found at the time. But let's talk about what the court has said about Mkhwebane, where they're saying Mkhwebane was wrong and went beyond the parameters of interpretation. Your reaction to this judgment?
Good morning, Polly, and good morning to fellow South Africans. I think, first of all, I think we must remind ourselves how we arrived at the question. We had an affidavit that stated categorically that the President's son had received a donation from Bosasa. Back then, a company that had dealings with a number of ANC politicians. Therefore, as leader of the opposition, you have no alternative except to use the tools available to you in the Constitution to ask the President questions. And if you are unsatisfied with that question, the only avenue you can use is to then refer the matter to the Public Protector, because that's where the Executive Ethics Code is investigating. So I think it's important to buttress the very statement that opens this issue. On a more serious matter, though, I do think that the question still remains. Can a company sponsor a politician who then that same company get a lot of contracts from the state? Remains a question. I think we shouldn't depart from that question. But on the finding against the Public Protector, I do think all of us as South Africans need to be concerned that there's a record of findings against the Public Protector on all levels of our courts. And I think all of us need to remind ourselves that this is the only office that has been set up, that the South African Constitution gives a higher status to investigate public misuse of funds in this regard. And I think it is important that we strengthen that office to ensure that we're not getting judgments like this. Because when people lose confidence in raising complaints with the Public Protector, the net consequence of it is that they lose confidence in its ability to investigate corruption, and corruption will run rampant.
What does strengthening the office of the Public Protector mean, sir?
Well, I do think that it's always important that, as you would know, when I was leader of the opposition, I did not support the appointment of the incumbent at the moment. I, in fact, voted against it, and we did. And furthermore, I maintain, so the first is the person in their understanding. It becomes important that the person upholds the institution and its strength. But furthermore, I know, having spoken to both public protectors, the current and the former, their capacity to investigate is poor because of funding. So we need to capacitate it and give it more funding if we're going to win the battle against corruption.
Now, what would you say about the argument around transparency and also the possible change to the ethics code to include private donations to political parties and, in fact, to individuals. I know that you also had to face a similar thing during the time when you were the leader of the DA. Let's explore that principle.
Well, I think the first bigger principle is that the method of us electing the president in this country means that actually the president is elected at Nasrec before we get to elect them in parliament. So in that instance, when funding then occurs, it becomes a matter of public interest. We can't change the fact that 400 million rands was spent on an internal campaign. This is 4,000 delegates. You can't simply say to me that that had something to do with marquees and T-shirts. I mean, unless they're very expensive marquees, these. So I would argue that it becomes a matter of public interest, as Chief Justice Mogoeng has stated in the minority report. But what I think is important going forward is that if we can change that and get direct democracy, these funds then become of public interest, because now we know who is being elected and what money they are spending and why was that money spent, so that we, the citizens, can determine that. So I think that becomes the next most important.
Would you say that this also extends to other political parties? Because I think the argument that says that it's incorrect to assume that the ANC will perpetually win an election, that if you're looking at funding of campaigns, that it should be all-encompassing.
Absolutely, and it should extend to every other party. I was very deliberate. When the question was put to me to say, have you declared the funding, I went straight back to Parliament and handed the declaration in terms of what was funding an internal campaign. So I think, broadly speaking, when these matters become of public interest, it's when we directly elect people, and it must include anyone who stands for the office of president in the Republic. And therefore, that's why I keep maintaining we must reform the Electoral Act and also reform what donations are being brought out to people so that there's transparency. South Africans must know, what did Bosasa expect in return from President Ramaphosa when they sponsored his campaign?
Mr. Besani, this is where you come in. Is Mr. Maimane being honest when he says at the time that he led the main opposition Democratic Alliance, they've always been transparent and forthcoming about their donations? Is that true in your recollection?
No, in my recollection, I cannot confirm that. What one can say with regards to that, we know that some of this they only came through media and so on. So I wouldn't speak on his behalf. But I think what is very, very important is that on the issue of private investigation by the public protector, the courts have ventilated, the apex courts have ventilated on the matter, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has been vindicated on his concerns on how the matter has been handled. And I think for that, the matter is closed. There is no way that the president bona fides could be doubted, because he has gone at length. Even when Mr. Maimane asked him a question and later explained, corrected, and it didn't take months or years for President Ramaphosa to correct himself. So the courts have actually explained elaborately and correctly the conduct of the president from the very onset when Mr. Maimane raised the question. So I think we all agree, and that is what elates us as the ANC. We all agree that if we are to be open, we are to be frank, to be transparent, actually, we can't be anecdotal about these things. The rules must apply to everybody. And that's what it's all about.
But Mr. Besani, the ANC has been on record in saying that the Political Party Funding Act is affecting the party adversely, in that some of its donors are no longer willing to make donations to the party, and that they do not want to be known. And that seems to be in conflict with what you are saying on the side of transparency. Do you, at the very least, though, accept that ethically there is something questionable about a donor who, if they truly believe in the policies or the ideals of the party would not want their identity to be known?
Now, look, the ANC when the Treasurer General was making that statement, he was once again being more open to the public about how some of the donors, the attitude of some of the donors in that regard. He was not trying to hide anything. So, and part of it is that it is not the making of the ANC to always or to hide the donors, you know. It is in the context of some of the challenges that we come across as the ANC. So I don't think that is an issue that should suggest that the ANC sees this act as, problematic per se.
Well, gentlemen, as we wrap up this conversation, I think it would be remiss of us, my colleague and I here, Sbu Ngalwa, to not take this discussion or perhaps digress and talk about a particular judgment which is quite important as this one, forgetting another one in the recent past. I think the judgment surrounding the former president, Jacob Zuma, the foundation issuing a statement not agreeing with that particular judgment. Mr. Besani, I want to start with you. What should be the overriding response of ANC members at a time like this when the country is set to be in uncertain times, given that the decision, or rather the former president, is now faced with the prospect of actually going and sitting in jail for 15 months?
Look, I think the ANC has made a statement in that regard, and that statement is very clear that inasmuch as we're not excited, remember, judgments do not have to please people, do not have to create excitement and so on. But our commitment to the rule of law has been supported by the African National Congress and will continue to be supported. And this is what the ANC has always called its members, to respect the rule of law. So that statement of the ANC states a principled approach on the judgment against former President Zuma.
A principled approach is one thing, Mr. Besani, but to actually follow that principle is another. You have members of your party who are saber-rattling right now, saying that there's got to be some kind of quote-unquote resistance against this judgment.
Look, once again, the ANC has never encouraged people to defy the courts of law.
So what are you going to do about them?
No, the ANC will discuss the matter. The NEC is sitting this week. It will have, I wouldn't want to preempt it, but as a matter of principle, the African National Congress supports the courts of law, the rule of law, and it will never veer away from our constitutional democracy. That is what we always say. That is why in some judgments that do not favor us, we swallow the bitter pill, but we respect the rule of law and we abide by those by the judgments. So we have always said it to our members. They know, the members of the ANC, they know that they have to respect the rule of law. And the fact that some judgments are unpleasant, it does not, and we have, people express that, does not mean the ANC says people should not respect the rule of law. So it's a statement that the ANC continues and will continue to echo, because this constitution that we have today has been hard-earned through blood and sweat, and the ANC has been at the forefront of achieving this constitutional democracy we have.
All right. Mr. Maimane, very, very briefly, I am out of time. You are a respected public figure. In your view, what should South Africans be doing right now, particularly those who support the former president? It's difficult times for him, but what should we do? We're going into uncertain times right now.
We certainly are but my call always remains that we should stand as citizens of this country on the side of the rules and the Constitution. That's what we all binds us all as South Africans. And therefore, we should not be participating in the defense of an individual who has been found against those laws. The crisis that has been politically manufactured in the ANC cannot be imported to the Republic of South Africa. Therefore, I would urge that this is a time that the person who is leading South Africa at the moment, President Ramaphosa, to be able to give strong leadership to say, we will uphold the supremacy of the Constitution, regardless of who. Everyone is equal under the law of the Republic, and therefore we should not be importing ANC politics into what the state must do. If Mr. Zuma must serve his time, as difficult as that is, and as hard as it is to see, that must happen because that's what the Concord has ruled. Now, if we suddenly get into a political negotiation, I think we'll be in trouble as a republic.
Mmusi Maimane, thank you very much. In fact, you've taken the words right out of my mouth. Unfortunately, I am out of time. That question actually should have been posed to you, Mr. Besani. You sit in the president's office. He's been quiet. The judgment was handed on Tuesday. The president is quiet. Perhaps I should put it to you. I will be in trouble for missing this break, but respond. Where is the president?
No, there's something that I think it is unfair to say the president is quiet. The African National Congress believes in a principle of collective leadership. And on that basis, it issued a statement which the president has echoed over and over and over, that he believes in the rule of law. He believes in this constitution. He believes in defending the Constitution. The president has said it more than times, even in interviews where media has been asking that question. The president has continuously subjected himself to the rules. He has never been quiet on the matter.
Right.
And when the ANC has spoken on a matter in the manner that it did after the judgment on former President Zuma, that becomes his posture, that becomes the attitude of the president. It also expresses the attitude of the president.
All right. Mr. Besani, thank you very much for your time. Well, that is the sum total of this discussion. It was about the Constitutional Court judgment on the matter between the Public Protector and the President of the Republic of South Africa.